Happy New Year's Eve, everyone. I hope you're all getting ready for a fun night. You know, as we're all getting ready to ring in 2025, it feels like Canadian politics decided to drop a bombshell right before the clock strikes midnight. We're going to take a deep dive into something that might be even more unpredictable than your New Year's Eve plans. The shocking decline in support for Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party.
It's a political earthquake, really.
Interestingly. So to kick off this deep dive, you sent over a couple of pretty interesting sources. First, we've got this Reddit discussion on Blug World News, of all places, about the Canadian political scene.
Oh, yeah, that one.
I mean, you never know what you're going to find on Reddit, right?
Yeah.
But it's a gold mine of unfiltered opinions, let me tell you.
Absolutely.
And for a different perspective, we've got an article from the Toronto Sun, which, as you know, leans conservative.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've got these two very different sources, but they both seem to agree on one thing.
What's that?
Trudeau's approval rating has hit historic lows.
It's true. We're talking 16% according to the Angus Reid poll.
16%. Oof. I mean, things haven't been great for Trudeau lately, but that's pretty brutal.
It's not just low, it's almost unprecedented for a sitting prime minister. To put it into perspective, this rivals the Liberal Party's devastating defeat back in 2011 when they were reduced to just 34 seats.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that election. It felt like a total rejection of the Liberals at the time.
Exactly. And this current situation has echoes of that same sentiment. What we're seeing with Trudeau isn't just a dip in popularity, it's a full-blown rejection of his leadership.
So what's going on? I mean, what's fueling this discontent?
Well, if we dig deeper into both sources, we see a few recurring themes driving this public disapproval.
Yeah, well, the Reddit thread is a whirlwind of opinions, some more colorful than others. But one commenter said it's like Biden polling lower than Kari Lake in Vermont, which is pretty wild when you think about it.
It's a pretty vivid analogy when you say.
Yeah, it kind of puts it into perspective, but let's break it down a bit.
Right.
One of the big issues that keeps coming up is the cost of living crisis.
Absolutely. That's a major concern for Canadians right now.
It seems like everything is getting more expensive except our paychecks. I saw this crazy post on Reddit about a college town where 27 students were crammed into a single apartment because they couldn't afford anything else.
That's a chilling illustration of how dire the housing situation has become, especially for younger Canadians. Housing costs have skyrocketed, wages haven't kept pace, and inflation is eating away at everyone's purchasing power. This financial pressure is creating a sense of anxiety and desperation for many.
Right, and it's not just housing. Grocery bills are through the roof. Gas prices are all over the place. It feels like you can't catch a break.
You're absolutely right. And this economic squeeze is a major factor in Trudeau's declining popularity. People are struggling to make ends meet, and they're looking for someone to blame.
And it seems like a lot of that blame is landing squarely on Trudeau's shoulders. Both the Reddit thread and the Toronto Sun article talk about how he's perceived as being out of touch with the average Canadian. Like he's more concerned with his image and jet setting around the world than dealing with the problems people are facing at home.
This perception of Trudeau as elitist and disconnected from the everyday struggles of Canadians is a recurring theme in both sources. And it's compounded by the string of scandals that have plagued his time in office.
Yeah, let's not forget about those.
No, definitely not.
We've got the SNC-Lavalin affair, the allegations of Chinese interference in Canadian elections, and even that whole ArriveCan app fiasco. I mean, none of that helped his image.
Each scandal, regardless of its specific details, chips away at public trust and contributes to a narrative of ethical lapses.
It's like one thing after another.
Really is.
And then there's the whole issue of immigration. The Toronto Sun article in particular really focuses on that.
Right. Immigration is a complex issue, and it's one that's generating a lot of anxiety, particularly when it comes to the housing crisis. Some people see uncontrolled immigration as exacerbating the problem and putting additional strain on resources.
And, you know, even in the Reddit thread, people are talking about how maybe the current approach to immigration isn't working as well as it could. And it's not necessarily about stopping immigration altogether, but more about finding a sustainable balance, right?
Exactly. A balance that allows Canada to remain welcoming to newcomers while also addressing the concerns of those who feel that rapid immigration is putting undue pressure on housing and wages.
Okay, so we've got economic anxieties, a perception that Trudeau is out of touch, a string of scandals and concerns about immigration. It's like a recipe for political upheaval.
It certainly seems like the ingredients are all there. And the big question now is, if not Trudeau, then who?
Right, because even though Trudeau is incredibly unpopular right now, the Toronto Sun article points out that there's no guarantee that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are a slam dunk replacement.
That's a key point. Dissatisfaction with the current leader doesn't automatically translate into support for the opposition.
And even on Reddit, where people are pretty critical of Trudeau, there's some healthy skepticism about Poilievre. I saw someone describe his voice as a Marge Simpson-Milhouse crossover.
A Marge Simpson-Milhouse crossover.
I know, right? I can't unhear it now.
Well, that certainly paints a memorable picture. But beyond the humor, it reflects a broader uncertainty about whether Poilievre truly represents the change that people are looking for.
So if it's not Trudeau and maybe not Poilievre, what about the NDP? They're often seen as the third option in Canadian politics. But are they really in a position to capitalize on this moment?
That's the question we're going to unpack next. The NDP, they're in a fascinating spot right now, kind of a crossroads, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they've been propping up the Liberals for a while now.
Yeah.
But it hasn't exactly been smooth sailing for them either, right?
Right. The Toronto Sun article, it pointed out that the NDP's disapproval rating, well, it's at an all-time high too, according to Angus Reid.
Really? Wow. So even though they've had a hand in shaping some policies, it's not like it's translated into more popularity for them.
It seems like they've been overshadowed by the Liberals. There's this feeling that they haven't really shown strong enough leadership on their own. And some people are even questioning Jagmeet Singh's leadership, you know?
Yeah, I've heard that too. It makes you wonder, what happens if the NDP actually decide to break away from the Liberals? Like, what if they trigger an election?
That's a big question. I mean, would it just end up handing the victory over to the Conservatives?
And is that really what Canadians want right now? I mean, yeah, Trudeau's unpopular, but is Poilievre really the answer?
That's what we need to figure out. Would a Conservative government under Poilievre actually deal with the problems that are making people so unhappy? You know, things like the housing crisis, the cost of living, that general feeling that things just aren't working.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in wanting change, but it's got to be the right kind of change. Poilievre has been going after Trudeau pretty hard, especially on the economy and immigration. But what are his actual solutions?
Yeah, it's like he's promising a change of direction, but without a clear roadmap.
Yeah.
And that uncertainty, it just adds to the anxiety a lot of Canadians are already feeling.
It's like taking a leap into the unknown.
Exactly. And you never know where you might land.
So we're kind of stuck with this dilemma, right? We've got Trudeau, who a lot of people just aren't happy with. Then there's Poilievre, who represents change, but it's a big unknown. And then you've got the NDP, who, well, they're somewhere in between.
It makes you think, is there even room for a fourth option? A party that's not just the same old Liberals or Conservatives, you know?
Yeah.
Party that can really deal with the challenges we're facing today.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of Canadians are looking for something different, something more. They're tired of the same old problems and the same old faces. It's like we're at this breaking point.
I think you've hit on something important there. The political landscape right now, it's ripe for disruption.
But the question is, what's that disruption going to look like? Okay, so we've got a nation that's feeling pretty anxious, a political system that's all over the place, and a whole lot of questions that need answers. But let's bring it back to Trudeau for a sec. What's he going to do next? Does he just hang on to power and risk taking the whole Liberal Party down with him? Or does he step aside, try to save what's left of his legacy?
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Trudeau's a pretty resilient guy. He's gotten through tough times before. But this feels different, doesn't it? It feels bigger.
Yeah, it does. The Toronto Sun article said that almost half of the people they polled want him to just resign now and let someone else take over.
Wow.
And it's not just the average person on the street. Some of his own party members are saying he needs to go. It's hard to imagine him ignoring all that pressure.
He's definitely feeling the heat from all sides. But remember, Trudeau's a smart politician. He knows the stakes are high, for him and for the whole Liberal Party.
So here we are on New Year's Eve, and the future of Canadian politics is up in the air. Trudeau's fate is uncertain. The Conservatives see a chance to grab power. And the NDP, well, who knows what they're going to do.
It's enough to make you want to skip the champagne and stick to coffee tonight, just to stay awake for whatever happens next in this political drama.
And it's not just some political game. These decisions, they have real consequences for Canadians. People's hopes, their fears, their futures, it's all connected to what's happening in Ottawa. So, before we wrap things up, let's leave you with a question to think about as we head into 2025. What if the answer isn't Trudeau, or Poilievre, or even the NDP? What if the real solution to all this political mess, is something totally different? Like, what if it's outside the whole liberal conservative thing?
It's an interesting thought, right? I mean, all over the world, you see people getting fed up with the established political parties.
It's like they're looking for something new, something fresh, someone who actually gets what they're going through, not
Sure.
just more of the same old, same old. It's like that saying, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe sticking with the same parties, the same ideas, is just not going to cut it anymore. Maybe that's not how Canada moves forward, you know?
This whole deep dive, looking at the Reddit thread, the Toronto Sun article, it shows that people are hungry for change, real change. And that opens up a lot of possibilities. Like, could this be the time for a brand new political party to step up? A party that speaks to the people who feel like they're not being heard.
You know, both the Reddit thread and that Toronto Sun article, they both kind of touch on this idea of a third-party alternative, but they also say how hard it is for a new party to really make it in Canada.
Yeah, you're right. It's a tough system to crack. It takes more than just people being unhappy. You need organization, money, and a message that really connects with voters.
But look at what's happening now. You've got a prime minister who's not popular at all, a challenger who hasn't really won people over, and a third party that can't seem to get any momentum. It's like the doors are wide open, right?
It really does feel that way.
And don't forget about social media, places like Reddit. They can be where new ideas and movements start. They give people a way to connect, to vent their frustrations, to organize.
Right.
We've seen how those online conversations can turn to something real, something that shakes things up. Remember the whole Freedom Convoy thing?
Yeah.
Whether you agreed with it or not, it started online and became a big deal in Canadian politics.
It shows how these grassroots movements, starting online, can disrupt things, can make the big parties pay attention.
So as we head into 2025, it's not just about who's going to win the next election. It's about whether Canadian democracy can change, can evolve, can keep up with these crazy times. It's about whether the people who feel forgotten, whether their voices can come together and create real change. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I just want to say, stay engaged, stay informed, stay curious. Because in the end, the future of Canada is up to all of us.